Tell us a little bit about you growing up and learning how to play tennis. How did that happen?
I was born in New Orleans, and my family moved to Thousand Oaks, California when just before I turned 8. We moved into a house that was very close to a nearby tennis club, and I started to play kind of on my own with my new best friend, and we played all summer. It turned out I had an aptitude for it, and I started taking lessons. Pretty soon I was competing in the Southern California junior tennis tournaments. I eventually became a national junior tennis champion. I won the boys 16 national doubles title and was ranked in the top 5 or 10 usually in my age groups. And I parlayed that into a full scholarship at USC, and there I was an All-American and played number 1 my last year, and then went on the Pro Tour. And for about 3.5 years, I got ranked in the top 150 in the world in singles and doubles.
Quite impressive. So now from your early days of developing, were there some coaches that kind of came along and helped you develop your game or gave you kind of the philosophy by which to play?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was 14, there was a man named Rod Williams who came to our club for a very short time but was very influential. He really helped my game, especially teaching me how to practice. Like, he was ahead of his time in terms of training outside of tennis, but even the training within tennis was quite novel at that time, and he changed a few things that really was important for me. And then a second coach was Larry Easley, who I ended up going and living with for 2 years in the beautiful city of Ojai, California. Larry went on to become the head pro at the Jack Kramer Tennis Club, where he coached Pete Sampras and Lindsay Davenport, and he took me off the tennis court, and we would go and run steps, at the local football stadium. I'd never done anything like that. I always had just trained by playing tennis, and I started to lift, light weights with him. He just trained in kind of like the Harry Hopman way. Fitness was a key priority of the practice, not just repetition.
Roy Emerson was just in town for our USPTA convention, and so he was talking about Hopman, and Hopman's whole thing was, well, if you don't have any strokes, then you better be a great athlete. The next guy, so Larry, what would you say is the most important thing that you learned from him?
Larry was more practical. He was a serve and volleyer and great doubles player. First of all, it was what I did by moving in with him and going to school in Ojai. I was one of the first kids to really do something like that. So to kind of have that attention, and have that focus all on me was quite great, just in general. And then very specifically, Larry essentially taught me a big serve and my volleys, and I ended up with a serve and volley game. He was pretty instrumental for giving me the tennis tools, skills to go into the next phase of my tennis career. Everything was based mostly on my ground strokes and aggressiveness, but with a big serve and good volleys, that really cemented my game quite a bit.
It was that era when people first began to leave home, and you had, up here we had Phil Cello, who would have people over, and they would stay, locally and live with him, near him, to get training every day. And then, obviously Paul Terry, and then this guy. About what years were that when you first started seeing that happen? Well,
when I did it, it was 1976 until I graduated high school in 78. It was 2 full years. And, the Bolletary Academy, as far as I know, was just coming online at that time. I don't know when, you'd have to look to see when it officially started, but I think that was around the same time. I didn't know of any other junior in Southern California, boy or girl, that did what I did. And certainly there were certainly a number of people, juniors, that moved from wherever they were, for instance, to be closer to Robert Lansdorp down in the South Bay, but not do this kind of live in. With a few more kids, we would have had our own tennis academy. So this is interesting because Mark Weil now is based out of the same club that I played at, and he's got an academy there. So
it's a fascinating transition in approach. I bought the Nick Bollettieri Handbook of Tennis, and he gives the history in there. And he essentially what he did is he bought an apartment complex that had tennis courts. You made the shift of playing one way, and then you encountered kind of the inner game of tennis. How did that happen?